wait for that, Mike, or are they ready? No, I think we're good. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the today's council meeting. We'll start with the invocation from Steve Bellow of O'Fallon Christian Church. Steve, come on up. And then Dave Hammond will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, we call upon you this evening to join us as we consider these measures that are before us. Father, we ask for your grace and mercy as we make decisions that affect people's lives and the community that we serve. We ask for your patience as we listen well. Father, we ask that you guide us to create a stronger county filled with families that serve, families that participate, and families that strengthen the fabric of our society. And Father, in the light of the weather we've had, we ask your added presence and protection of those that serve us even tonight out, scraping and sliding and serving this community. Be with those, the police officers, the highway workers, all of those that are putting themselves in harm's way just to keep us moving forward, as this council does each and every time it meets. We ask this in your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilman Cronin.
Here.
Councilman White. Councilman Elam.
Here.
Councilman Brazel.
Here.
Councilman Hammond.
Here.
Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Here.
Now we'll move into public comments. We take 3 minutes on pro and 3 minutes con on each topic. And go ahead, Claire or Donna.
Our first speaker is Megan Wunderlich.
Thank you, members of the council. My name is Megan Wunderlich. I am a resident of West Alton, Missouri, and I request your help. It has been 6 months since the flood has inundated parts of St. Charles County. It has been 5 months since we were able to assess and address damages to our property. In the past 5 months, many things have happened. The city of West Alton has bought and moved into a new city hall. We celebrated with an open house, lunch, and a visit from Santa. The levee district has been busy repairing levees. Homes have been rebuilt or raised to meet minimum elevation requirements. Businesses have reopened. Farmers have planted winter crop. And yet, a library sits empty, a stark reminder of a library board of directors and administrative staff who are working seemingly inefficiently in addressing our needs on the northeast end of the county. Orchard Farm School District is now the only district in the county without a library building and a diminishing presence. Their solution for circulating materials is a library by mail system, which is unacceptable for the residents of Portage de Sioux and West Alton, who are receiving poor to no postal service due to the post office building being in disrepair. 32% of residents in the northeast St. Charles County do not have equal access to internet services and are faced with greater troubles without equal and inclusive library services. Troubling us more are the proposed developments along the Missouri River in Maryland Heights and St. Charles. In Maryland Heights, a proposed TIF will be voted on tomorrow, December 18th, which would create a special taxing district to fund development along Highway 141. In St. Charles, the Rivers Point development claims river levels will not be affected and the development won't flood due to a 500-year flood elevation of the property, both of which are false and unacceptable to residents downstream due to an increased flooding threat. Higher and more frequent flash flooding will occur and threaten to destroy the city of West Alton. Please, I beg of you, do everything in your power to restore library services to the Orchard Farm School District. Open our post office. and stop these gratuitous projects from coming to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak on the flooding in West Alton? Okay, seeing none, Claire?
Matt Poston.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for being here this evening to hear us.
Can you pull that mic up?
Yes. I'm Matt Poston. I'm with THT Design Group. I have come here tonight in representation for Mr. Phil Fischota. We're here on an appeal for a variance. I have an exhibit that I wanted to show. We've got a comment about approving site distance around a corner at the intersection of Murdoch Lane and Berg Crossing Avenue. Or Berg Crossing Drive, sorry. I wanted to exhibit that that building of this home would not impact that corner, if you guys wouldn't mind.
Do you want to put it under?
It'll come up.
It'll come up on the screen.
It's kind of hard to see with the light.
This is pretty much what you showed us at the last council meeting, isn't it?
Well, somewhat, but I've got a few pictures as well
Okay.
to show viewing in those directions. The photos would have been taken from this point here at the intersection and from this point down here, looking back towards the intersection.
Right.
You notice the rock outcropping that currently exists. This red line here identifies the county's site triangle requirement for the intersection of the two streets. This photo is from the southern location, looking northerly towards Murdoch Lane, which would be here. This red dot identifies where a visible person would be sitting in a car. This line here identifies where the house, the face of the house would be in respect to this existing rock cropping out here. As you can see by this, the house being back here is not going to impact visibility in this area at all. And the next photo exemplifies the same thing. This is looking southbound. Here, the house from this point is actually 50 feet further back into the property, so the house would not be visible from this point at all. And then this shows where the driveway would be coming out, and here would be an approaching vehicle. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the variance from Augusta Shores? All right, seeing none, Claire?
Joyce Wiley.
Hello. Do you want me to?
Just say whatever you wanted to say.
Oh, just
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I
great.
have everything here. I'm here because I live on 20 acres off of Duello Road in the old Duello farmhouse, and I have a black walnut tree farm for 34 years. And Lake St. Louis wants to involuntarily annex 15 acres that is agricultural. And I live on 5 acres with the home. And this has been going on for several years. McBride built on my northern boundary, had a road ending there, and they wanted to put a 50-foot hiking trail just recently from there through the woods and through the fields, the walnut fields. And what else? The other point, I'm just speechless right now.
The point would be that you don't want it to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
I have been fighting it for several years, and there's just no, they just have been harassing me really for 3 years.
And you invited them out because you wanted to show them how pretty your property was, not because you wanted them to have it.
I
as a
have,
park.
last week, I did talk about this, but I
Yeah.
didn't know I was supposed to talk about it today, but, yeah. So we're, any questions that you have?
When the resolution comes on the floor, we
Okay.
can ask some
Okay.
questions to any of the council
But that's
members have any.
basically,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, thank you,
All right,
Joyce.
thanks.
Is there anybody else that's here to talk about the resolution on the Walnut Tree Farm?
Dale Bax.
I'm going to wait.
You'll wait?
Yep.
Sabrina Wren.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be before you this evening. My name is Sabrina Wren, and I reside in unincorporated southwest St. Charles County, very near the area impacted by RZ 1914. I am opposed to this rezoning request, which is made by Bax Engineering on behalf of Greystone Holdings, a developer, and as I know it, Tim Griffey, a builder, for several reasons, which I'll explain this evening. First, I watched the hearing of the Planning and Zoning Commission related to this rezoning request. I was troubled by the Planning and Zoning staff because it appears they are laboring under a mistaken idea that if a developer presents to them a plan that meets some unstated specifications, they must recommend it. This mistake has led to the commission rubber stamping rezoning requests, and in turn, that has led the county to inefficient and short-sighted development that overwhelms the current infrastructures, and it costs county taxpayers unnecessary money. The county government itself has admitted this in the master plan, where in Section 6 of land use, the county states, and I quote, "Land use growth is outpacing infrastructure development, and inefficient development is increasing the cost of providing infrastructure to support growth." Now, those are the county government's words, not mine. The commission and the council are charged with enforcing the county ordinances and are well within their authority to deny rezoning requests if those requests do not serve the public interest. And that includes requests for rezoning that make things worse, those problems that the county has promised to solve. Enforcing the county ordinances means when the commission and the council receive a rezoning request, the members must consider the following: the public need for the proposed use, the suitability of the property in question for the uses permitted under the requested rezoning, the adequacy of public facilities and infrastructures like sewers and water systems and other necessary public services, that the general public health and safety and welfare will not be damaged, and that the land values of adjoining property will also not be damaged. Neither the commission nor the council can legitimately advance the request for rezoning unless the rezoning is in the public interest, and not solely for the interest of the applicant. In fact, it's the burden on the applicant to prove that these things are true.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, your time is up.
All right.
We will talk about this bill when it comes off the floor.
Okay,
off the
thank you.
table. Is there any other speakers on Bill 4798?
There are. Dale, do you want to speak now?
No, I'm going to wait till...
We go pro and con. So it would be up to you if you want to let him wait till the end to speak.
Dale, do you want to wait till the bill comes up, or you want to talk now?
I'd like to wait till the bill...
That's fine. That's fine. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak on this forced zoning?
Dave Muelling.
Good evening. So can I put something on the overhead? Okay, great. I've got a couple of illustrations here. I live, and I'll put one of these up here so we can see a good idea. Uh-oh, there we go. I live on this property right here where this little tab is. And what I have represented on this chart, the blue is a current subdivision, Auburn Meadows. And that went in 2004 with a lot of promises of, we'll be careful ministers of the ecology there and trees and keeping things there and erosion and a lot of these other issues, the water problems that we have in the area, the flooding, so on and so forth, which haven't really come to fruition. There's been problems since. So the promises made were definitely not kept. And what I wanted to show with this illustration here, the red property that you see is the property in question that we're talking about developing. With 5-acre lots, it makes a lot of sense in there. I can understand that. Dropping it to 3-acre and putting 20 some odd homes on there, 20, 25 homes, 26, whatever it was, I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the land around there. And if we look at this, you'll see the domino effect that starts to happen. We heard this in the zoning commission that, well, we're going to pass this because Auburn Meadows was passed in 2004. And we have everything in yellow is for sale right now. And all those properties, the one at the top is about $24,000 an acre. The one below that's $26,000 an acre, and the one down the corner is $22,000 to $25,000 an acre. So these are not priced for individuals to buy. These are all priced for development. And what we're seeing is just a cascading effect. And what I'm hoping is that when you guys see, and if you look at the little arrows, that's where the water flow is going to go right down. That red line at the bottom is Dardine Creek. Everything's coming down, and with all those trees gone, everything's going to flow right downstream at a pretty rapid pace. And to give an idea, this is when we had the flash floods a couple months ago. This is what happened just in my area. That big ditch you see is the side of my driveway, and that huge log, it's about 2 feet around, that got pulled out of the woods behind. This whole thing looked like the Mississippi coming through. And this is in just a little creek. Dardine was even higher. And this is another shot. You can see it wiped out completely underneath my driveway and wiped that whole thing out just from a flood in this area. Now, what my neighbors are seeing without, I'm sure she'll come up and talk about it, Alice, she's seeing a lot more erosion even to the south of this property. So, and to give you an example, this is the trees currently in the property that they're talking about keeping to keep a lot of the erosion out. And this is the plan for home lots. And they're saying, well, they're going to keep all the trees except the homeowners obviously will take them all down. And if you look at Auburn Meadows next door, the same promise was made, but the green is all the foliage left there. Everything is nice manicured lawns with sprinkler systems. So we expect the same thing to happen now that happened before, and it's just not sustainable in the area. So I've got more to say. I'll put it in the record.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak about the Forestdale development?
Alice Fries Molitor.
Good evening. My name is Alice Fries Molitor, and I live at 1467 Forestdale Road, Forestdale, Missouri. And I'm asking the council to consider the 84-acre tract with a soil and conservation mindset. I'm asking for your help to make decisions which will affect all of our lives in rural western St. Charles County to remain with the existing zoning of 5-acre tracts or larger. Our soil is highly erodible with a slow infiltration rate. For generations since 1843, conservation practices such as strip planting, terraces, detention ponds, grass waterways have helped to control water, stormwater, and slow down soil erosion. Today, no-till farming is being practiced along with cover crops to save our topsoil in western St. Charles County. This is important for the health of our soil and future generations for raising food along with wildlife habitat. All the watershed that enters Dardine Creek begins at the extreme west side of St. Charles County. How fast or how controlled depends on the case that is given to the care that is given to the properties along Dardine Creek and up higher. Actually, Dardine Creek is named the Small Mississippi River. And I have a okay, this is let's see. Okay. This is the south end, the south side of Auburn Meadows. This is my property that lays around it. And the X's here show the erosion And on this side, this is the east side, this is the west side. Now, if this tract over here is developed into 3-acre tracts as Auburn Metals was, we can expect the same situation with erosion and water control. These are pictures. Well, they're marked 1, 1, 1, 1 matches up with the side over here, and this side over here, the number 2 pictures match up with the west side over here. Well, it's actually this corner right here that comes down, and they're marked. And I did send copies of these out to the council so they can review them in their spare time.
Thank you, Ms. Molitor. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on this Forestell issue?
Nancy Barrow-Sturry.
Nancy Aberasturi, 898 Forestell Road. I'm within 1,000 feet of the development that's proposed. I feel that the proposed rezoning serves no public interest and is inconsistent with the county's commitments to its agricultural districts. This farmland is in an area where there are several horse farms, a large horse boarding facility, and family farms. The proposed 2030 master plan recommends rural residential 3-acre minimum, too low in my opinion for our rural area. I think the ideal is 10. Yet this rezoning request is leapfrogging, if you will, over that even, the proposed master plan, to, I feel, the further detriment of our rural community to make this into a zone of single-family residential. I ask for your vote against this proposed change in zoning. Please be responsive to the needs and desires of the people who are already living here, including the farmers who rely on the land for their livelihood, thus preserving the agricultural and rural atmosphere that the current residents wish to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the Forestell development? All right, seeing none, moving to the next topic.
Arnie Dienoff.
Thank you, members of the County Council. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, County and State Public Advocate, and I'm also a county resident. The first thing that I'd like to address on your agenda is Bill number 4794. That's the Transportation Improvement Plan, where you spend our half-cent sales tax, which is roughly about $25 million annually. Now, Streets of Caledonia, LLC, has duped the county road board, and the county executive. Mr. Jessup, the executive of Payne Family Homes and Streets of Caledonia, LLC, he wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to not only ask the county for $4 million for Caledonia Parkway, he wants another $7 million to construct and make traffic enhancements to Missouri Double D and some ramps off of Interstate 64 that are paying by MoDOT and East-West Gateway Coordinating Council. Now, he also wants to have his cake also. He wants to create the Caledonia CID, known as a Community Improvement District, to collect 1% sales tax, not only on the businesses, but also charge, like Paul McKee did in Barrett Haven, charge the residents close to $1,000 per parcel for the next 20 years. I ask that you strip out the $4 million of the half-cent sales tax approved or recommended by the County Road Board for Caledonia Parkway. It's just capital greed and greed of a millionaire trying to make more profits. Now, on bill number 4798, amending the zoning plan to rezone from 5 acres to 3 acres, I ask that my testimony before the planning and zoning be a part of this record. I ask that the 5 acres remain. There's some water issues, runoff issues, detention issues. The plan is too dense. Erosion and sewer service are major concern, and I ask that you listen to these residents and their property values. And finally, bill number 4808, you keep crabbing about the county budget. You can't give the employees a pay raise, but yet you want to spend $250,000 for 3 full-time lobbyists in Jefferson City and the East-West Gateway Coordinating Council when Steve Ellman has a vote and he goes there monthly to the meetings. Not only that, he employs Vicky Hasselman that makes $80,000 a year, and Jennifer George, who monitor state legislation in Jefferson City on a daily basis. Where is our return on investment on the $250,000? It's a waste of taxpayer money. We need to rely more on our 2 state senators and our 11 state representatives who are our advocates in Jefferson City. This is just hogwash. I ask that you vote this bill 4808 down. It's a waste of taxpayer money, and I ask that you vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dinoff. All right, so, John, you want to step up?
No, you keep going. You're doing a good job.
He's been streaming on his way from the airport. He knows what's going on.
Okay, is any more public comments?
I have no more speaker cards.
Okay, moving on to the oral report from the county executive.
Not this evening, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Steve. Any motions on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to remove the IS for the phone system for discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Any other items? Seeing none? Go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Seeds, could you please come up? I guess I'm sorry you inherited this problem, okay? And because the phone system has been a problem that preceded your employment with the county. I think this is important to say this is a major decision for the county. I'm not real happy with it being on the consent agenda, and Mr. Brazel, I believe me and you down the road are going to be working on legislation so that stuff like this gets introduced as a bill with a dollar figure as big as it is. The biggest concern I have when reading through this is we all know that the phone system has got some serious problems, but when I'm reading how the approach was to solve the problems, it said that you basically began working with our current provider, AT&T. If my business, for instance, had a phone system as unreliable as the county's ones had, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't begin working with AT&T, okay? Most businesses that I'm aware of in this county do not even use the traditional phone company route anymore. They use Spectrum or another internet provider. And so my question to you is, was any discussion made about doing that? Because, I mean, I can tell you that from what I'm seeing, the dollar figures here, and I'm sure the scale is much bigger for you, but it seems to be it's a lot less expensive with Spectrum Business than it is with AT&T.
Sure, and we met with a number of providers to talk about that. So we started out with AT&T. This started back in February, this process did. So when I joined the county in July, we took a little bit of a different approach. We kept running kind of parallel tracks. We kept going with AT&T, but we also reached out to other entities to talk about phone system in general. I have previous experience with installing and implementing and deploying a new phone system, so I kind of brought some of that experience along with me to kind of bring up additional thought process on how we move forward with a system that'll work for the county as well as save taxpayer dollars.
Okay. But let me ask you specifically, besides the cost of the phone system, you have the cost of the phone service.
Sure.
Was there any comparison of the cost of the phone service between the internet providers and a traditional company like AT&T?
Absolutely. So actually the service that we use for our phone service is with Charter Spectrum. Mm-hmm. The service we use are PRI circuits, which are something that I wouldn't use, and that's why I kind of have a plan to go to SIP trunks, which is fully VoIP. And so yes, it will actually save dollars to go to that system. But yeah, we are using Spectrum for that system. AT&T is the one who handles all the maintenance on our current phone system. So we actually have kind of dual setup. We have AT&T handling the maintenance of our phone system, but actually the connection to the internet for our phones is through Spectrum.
Okay, so you've got two competitive companies basically involved with that system, okay?
Sure.
Okay, there was only one bid on this, okay? Okay, I mean, did you look at multiple companies other than AT&T for maintenance? Okay,
Well, maintenance for the current software, that's a completely separate from what you're seeing here tonight.
okay,
So we used a cooperative agreement for the purchase, or what we're hoping to use for the purchase for this this solution. So that's already been bid out. That's already been handled through that competitive process. So the prices already have been bid out.
okay, but the $700,000 we're expected to approve tonight, I saw one bid, am I?
Yeah,
am I
through a
correct?
cooperative agreement.
Okay, okay, and that cooperative agreement is still cheaper than you think you can find anywhere else?
Well, it's already been bid out, so that's the cheapest price that was selected for that cooperative agreement.
But you got one cooperative agreement price, right?
Mr. Seeds, what is the co-op that you're choosing?
Omnia Partners.
Yeah, it's they put it out they put it out and vendors bid on it typically every 2 years is what contracts usually last for. They all competitively bid. It's like a state contract or a federal contract, and they choose the most valid and most qualified vendor, and they win the bid. So that's the company he's working with is the one who's already been bid.
So you feel this is the best deal for the county, and you feel that the problems are going to go away with this?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, ladies, you heard that, okay? Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just to be on record, I told the director he was not to use the term SIP trunks or PRI circuits in his explanation, but he did it anyways.
That's okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Seeds? Okay, Mr. Cronin?
I would like to put that item back on the consent agenda for approval, please.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Another motion?
Motion to approve?
The agenda
The
is
consent
full.
agenda is ready.
Second?
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda has been approved. Moving on to bills for, where are we at? Bills for introductions? Or no?
Resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're at the resolution. Claire?
Resolution number 19-08, sponsored by council as a whole, a resolution opposing the involuntary annexation of Lake St. Louis of a portion of a Black Walnut Tree Farm.
Any questions or comments on this? I have some, but does anybody else want to go first?
No, go ahead. Where do you, what's
Oh,
happening?
I did, we had some conversation with, emails exchanged with City of Lake St. Louis, and everything that's stated in our resolution is a fact. It's true. Some of the minor things said 20 feet versus 50, but I talked about 50 feet. I talked to Mrs. Riley. She confirmed that everything's true. The invitation of coming out to the farm was merely to show it to them how beautiful it was, so they don't want them condemning it or involuntary annexing it to make it a park. Also, if you read the plan of intent, there has to be reasons what makes it more compelling for them to do an involuntary annexation. And some of the reasons were that people can hunt on her 15 acres and shoot guns, which makes it extremely hazardous, and that Lake St. Louis police will protect them from that. Well, our county police would too, because it's called trespassing if you're on somebody's property and you're shooting a gun and you're unwelcome. So the law is the same regardless of what municipality you have. And the 5 acres that she lives in, they're assuming that she would be completely safe if you're shooting 30-aught sixes on the 15 acres next to it. So, I mean, it does make no sense. And then taking the other reason, the compelling reason to annex is to, involuntary annex is to make her beautiful brook, stream, make it part of the sewer network for water and put concrete stabilization on it. It's just, anyway, so I still wholly support this resolution. It's the right thing to do. And as Mr. Watson pointed out, we are merely mirroring what was testified and said at the meeting. We are not, we're just taking from the record what was said and put into the resolution. So I believe that a city who involuntarily annexes somebody's property, I think they're being a bully, and I think it's wrong, and I think they're stealing our property, so I think it's wrong. That's my position.
I agree.
Mr. Cronin?
You have this situation in other places in the county, and I think involuntary annexation should only be used in extreme cases, and this is an extreme case. This lady should be able to live on her property, and in any political jurisdiction she chooses, she shouldn't be forced into doing something that she shouldn't have to do. So therefore, I support the resolution as well. Additionally, I've reached out to Lake St. Louis government and asked them to please reconsider. We had a situation similar to this in O'Fallon, and I met with the city of O'Fallon's administrator and president of their board of aldermen, and suggested that they be nice and play fair, and down the road, maybe the person might want to come into their city. But trying to force it down their throat is the wrong approach, I believe.
Resolution number 19-08, sponsored by council as a whole, a resolution opposing the involuntary annexation of Lake St. Louis of a portion of a black walnut tree farm. Mike Elam?
Yes.
Councilman Brazel?
Yes.
Councilman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilman Hollander? Councilman Schneider?
Yes.
Councilman Cronin?
Yes.
And Councilman White?
Yes.
Resolution is passed. Moving on to bills for final passage.
Bill number 4792, an ordinance adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 2020 budget for St. Charles County, Missouri.
Any questions or comments on Bill 4792?
Councilman Brazel?
Yes?
Oh, I'll read the title, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Bill number 4792, an ordinance adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 2020 budget for St. Charles County, Missouri. Councilman Brazel?
Yes.
Councilman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilman White?
Yes.
Councilwoman Schneider?
Yes.
Councilman Cronin?
No.
And Councilman Hollander? Councilman Elam?
Yes.
Bill 4792 is passed. Moving on to Bill 4793. Oh,
It's okay. Go ahead.
Bill number 4793, an ordinance affirming the Board of Zoning Adjustments decision on application VAR 19-03.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend Bill number 4793 and replace it with substitute Bill 4793.
Second.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have
Oh.
discussion.
Before you do that.
Okay.
This is the part on your points of interest where you ask if there's any discussion or amendment to the substitute that a council member would like to have.
Is there any discussion or amendment to the substitute a council member would like to offer at this time? I guess I can, or you want to, Mike?
I'd like to ask Mike Hurlbert if he wants to come up and make some statements about this and kind of give us their, or Robert to come up. I will defer to Robert on that one. Hey, if you don't have a dollar, you can't pass the buck, right? That was good.
You know, at your last meeting, you asked for the reasons why the Board of Zoning Adjustment voted how they did, and I provided a short answer, but I should probably expand on that to provide some context.
Well, Robert, the substitute on the floor is to reverse it, okay? So I think that what Michael's explained, why we're putting the substitute in, which puts an enactment to reverse it. That's, I think, what needs to be understood is not so much what they did, but what we're doing.
Okay. Procedurally, our ordinance requires that any decision by the county council in terms of the Board of Zoning Adjustment, it be approved by an ordinance. So whether you affirm the decision of the Board of Zoning Adjustment or you reverse the decision of the Board of Zoning Adjustment, it would have to be by ordinance. And so because of that, that's why it was first proposed as affirming, which would require just a simple majority. But if you want to reverse, then you have to provide a substitute bill, and that by ordinance would require supermajority.
Okay, and that's what we did, so.
Yeah.
He's still explaining.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to explain that in terms of their decision at the Board of Zoning Adjustments meeting in September, by their line of questioning, they provided some information that may be helpful for your decision. Their questions included, or their comments included, most of the homes in Augusta Shores subdivision have been built on hilly terrain, require grading of a paddle site or tall foundations on steep slopes. So I guess the question is, how is this different? Also, could the applicant reorient the house or modify the floor plan? And the applicant's representative basically responded that this is the floor plan they're looking to use. Now, the reason that's significant is because the county councilor's office has advised the Board of Zoning Adjustment, they've trained them to follow very closely 4 criteria, and it must meet all 4 of those criteria. And I like to think of it as a box. They have to work within the confines of that box. Each wall of the box, you might call it, is one of the criteria. So if it doesn't meet all 4 of those criteria, the Board of Zoning Adjustment, under the county councilor's advice, has been to deny the variance. Now, real quickly, this is in your memo, but number 1, is the variance due to unique circumstances inherent to the specific piece of property and not to personal considerations of the property owner? Is the variance needed as a result of an affirmative act of the property owner that could have been avoided through a different course of action? Would the variance merely grant a special privilege or benefit to the property beyond what is enjoyed by other properties regulated by the same set of regulations? And finally, there's a larger test for practical difficulties, which includes questions like what degree the owner can pursue the permitted use without a variance, could the difficulty be obviated by some other method other than a variance? So those comments by the by the Board of Zoning Adjustment, I think have some relevance in terms of their criteria. I just wanted to share that with you tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I guess first of all, we had a previous situation like this, I guess a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, that we approved a variance that was closer to this. And secondly, I don't understand, because basically if you don't grant this variance, I don't see how anybody's going to build on that lot, considering the slopes and on the ground. So I would support granting this variance.
Don David?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment too.
Thanks, Robert.
Robert, well, I was talking to him. No. If there's a hardship, I believe that this is a hardship. I don't know if you got almost a cliff, and that's how Augusta Shores is. And I called up Bill Shaw and asked him his opinion. He's built a house there, and he was granted a 20-foot variance, and he told me there's been over 13 of these variances granted. So I don't know why they're any different than anybody else. And so I think that this is the kind of lot that has hardships with rock cliffs and the topography. And so this is the perfect case, and I'm quite confused why the Board of Adjustments didn't grant them this variance, so I'm wholeheartedly in favor of this.
Well, I think the discussion of what Robert laid out is important to note, that the Board of Variance has to operate within the guidelines of what they're given, and they don't have the flexibility of what we would have to look outside of that box. So because of the box that they were put in is kind of why I think they had to make the decision that they had. I completely agree with you. I think we should give them this variance, and I think they're well within their rights to ask for this, and I think it makes perfect sense, and I think that's why we're here to do that. But I think it was important that we hear and we understand, and everybody gets to understand why the Board of Variance had to make the decision that they had, because they don't have the flexibility that we have to look at those individuals.
You operate under the same guidelines as the Board of Zoning Adjustment. So you're sitting in the same administrative determination role as they are. So you actually have the same rules to abide by.
Okay, then I misunderstood what he said.
Thanks for saying that. If I could, in addition, the Board of Zoning appeal process allows for any agreed parties to file suit on this, so that if they feel that if the decision is wrong and wrongs them in any way, they would be able to take it further. So that's why it was important. I wanted to be able to reiterate the conditions that the BZA has had to operate under, and therefore you have to operate under. That's the only point of our speaking here.
Mr. Cronin?
If you look at the site plan and you look at the photos that they presented, and you look at the 4 different corners of the box that Robert just defined, every one of those 4 points in that 4 corners of the box, this property, is compliant with. It's this unique topography. It's definitely a hardship to this person if we didn't grant it to him. So everything that you define in that 4 corners, and when I look at this property, I think, yeah, that's right. So I'm in support of this as well.
I would make mention of the fact that they could vary the floor plan. there's 13 feet that they're asking. They could vary the floor plan, the size of this house, a different house, and potentially meet the setbacks. So that's one of the criteria. So, and that's, again, the BZA has to rule that all 4 have to be met. And that's one that they saw that there was an option. This homeowner has an option to build something different.
But to take, since they're against a rock ledge on the back side and a rock ledge on the front side, to take that 13 feet out means the house is 13 foot smaller. And that may be an option for me and some others, but I know it wouldn't be an option for my wife, okay? So, so that being said, when you're building your dream home, you don't want to have to make it smaller than you should, and to me, that's a hardship, so.
Yeah. All right, are there any, thank you guys, thank you gentlemen.
Thanks.
All in favor of the substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, Claire, please read the title of the substitute bill and call the roll.
Substitute Bill Number 4793, an ordinance reversing the Board of Zoning Adjustments decision on application VAR 19-03. Councilman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilman Hollander? Councilwoman Schneider?
Yes.
Councilman Cronin?
Yes.
Councilman Brazel?
Yes.
Councilman Elam?
Yes.
Councilman White?
Yes.
The variance has been approved. Moving on to Bill 4794.
Bill Number 4794, an ordinance approving the Transportation Improvement Plan for fiscal years 2020 through 2022 and corresponding intergovernmental agreements.
Okay, please note that Section 15 of Exhibit E for Bill Number 4794 has been revised. Mr. Cronin?
I had some concern at the last meeting about the Streets of Caledonia project, and I met with the city administrator of O'Fallon and the president of their board and reviewed that project, and I as well spoke with John Greifswald on it. And I come across with the idea this is a great project. It's going to extend the outer road in that area. It's going to have better access for PW2, the water district out there. There's a lot of economic development, a lot of construction jobs. There's a lot of new jobs that have come to the area as well. So I had concerns as I didn't know that much, but I found out what I needed to know, and I'm supportive of the Transportation Improvement Plan. And this project at O'Fallon, I think, will be a good project for the entire county.
Well, I had some concerns about the CID as well. However, some of the funding's coming from other sources, but the fact is we have traffic congestion in that area. Highway 64 is becoming more and more congested, so this is going to, the more we do, the more relief we're going to get, and I think that's the good part of it. So sometimes certain things outweigh others, so I'm in favor of it as well. Any other comments? Okay, Claire?
Bill Number 4794, an ordinance approving the Transportation Improvement Plan for fiscal years 2020 through 2022 and corresponding intergovernmental agreements. Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Brazel.
Yes.
Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Bill 4794 is passed. Moving on to Bill 4795.
Bill Number 4795, an ordinance approving execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services for a grant award in the amount of $94,000 to combat opioid abuse.
Any comments or questions on 4795? Seeing none?
Bill Number 4795, an ordinance approving execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services for a grant award in the amount of $94,000 to combat opioid abuse. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Brazel.
Yes.
Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Councilman Hollander.
Bill 4795 is passed. Moving on to Bill 4796.
Bill Number 4796, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the University of Missouri Extension Council of St. Charles County to provide educational programs and services at a cost to the county of $100,000.
Any questions or comments on 4796? Seeing none?
Bill Number 4796, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the University of Missouri Extension Council of St. Charles County to provide educational programs and services at a cost to the county of $100,000. Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Brazel.
Yes.
Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Bill 4796 is passed. Moving on to 4797.
Bill number 4797, an ordinance amending sections 115.100, 115.110, 115.170, 115.320, 115.420, 115.430, 115.460, 115.660, 115.670, 115.710, 115.720, 115.721, 115.722, 115.800, and 115.1000 of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, and deleting section 115.120, all concerning the Personnel Administration Plan, including but not limited to benefits.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Cronin?
Yes, I would like to have our Director of Personnel come up and just give us a brief overview of this. I read this, and there's a lot going on here, okay?
Yes.
And if there's any controversy regarding any of it, I would like to know about it before we pass it. But if it's just something that basically you worked out with the Personnel Administration, okay, I'm fine with it, so.
Yeah, basically, it's just a cleanup of the PAP. We have some necessary changes, like, for instance, Section 115, 120, and 115, 800 are the same, so we got rid of one of them. We removed some confusing language from 115, 320, which talks about COBRA, and it's not necessary in that section. The same thing with Section 115, 430. We removed unnecessary language about FMLA. There was some missing information from 115, 100, which was the County Smoke-Free Act, so we put that in there. And then in Section 115, 420, the information about the Performance Improvement Plan was confusing, so we reworded that so it's easier to understand.
Okay, so basic cleanup.
Basic
Make it
cleanup.
simple.
Yes.
Okay, nothing controversial.
Nothing controversial.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other comments? Seeing none?
Bill number 4797, ordinance amending sections 115.100, 115.110, 115.170, 115.320, 115.420, 115.430, 115.460, 115.660, 115.670, 115.710, 115.720, 115.721, 115.722, 115.800, and 115.1000 of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, and deleting section 115.120, all concerning the Personnel Administration Plan, including but not limited to benefits. Councilman Brazel.
Yes.
Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Bill 4797 is passed. Moving on to bills for introduction. Bill number 4798.
Bill number 4798, requested by Mike Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel. An ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning a tract of land from A Agricultural District to RR Single Family Residential District per application RZ 19-14.
Any comments from any of you fellows?
Do you want to?
Who, Mr. Bax or Mr. Griffey? Did you guys you got any comments, or what do you want us to do? You said you want to say something, so.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were looking for a formal presentation for the rezoning and the preliminary plat, or if it's just up for introduction tonight, or is this something we're going to be discussing? I'd certainly like to answer any questions you guys might have for us this evening.
For me, it's my district. I have nothing. You don't need to do any presentation. I'm just going to make some comments. I don't support it, so, and that's all I really, I'd like to go into that, but I don't have, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bax while he's up here? No? Okay, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to hand this out to the council, hand that to Joe. If you guys remember, Mr. White was on the council. I don't think anybody else was, but I'm going to guess it was before Mike, and might have been, Robert, you might have been here, but we changed it from 3 to 5 acres. What, was that 8 years ago, 10 years ago, or something like that? 2006, okay. So we changed it because of what these folks were talking about. I mean, you start getting too many houses and so forth on 3-acre lots. 3-acre lots are too small. And especially with erosion, with roads, our roads are too small, there's too many curves, it's hilly, it's windy. And so we went to 5-acre lots. So we went, the last developments that's been on Forestdale Road, or that area, has been 5-acre lots. And the 5-acre lots seem to be selling, people seem to like them, and it's working out. So what you would get is with this subdivision, it would be either 28 homes or 18 homes. And as that gentleman explained, with all the available land, you're going to have just an influx of people with a burden of expenses to the infrastructure, meaning our schools, our roads, and everything else. So there has not been a 3-acre subdivision in this area for over 10 years, for 14 years or something like that. So the plan that we set up has been working. People are doing it. And Mr. Griffey is a fine builder. You know, I've known him for a long time. He goes back to the Florissant days. But I just can't support this because it doesn't fulfill what people want in that area. People want a rural area. And they haven't been doing 3-acre lots. And so it's just, it's not what the people in that area want. And I wasn't in favor of a 3-acre lot out this far. And that's just my position. Any questions or comments?
Steve has something.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd ask Mike or Robert this, but I don't know where they were in 2004. Mr. Brazel, do you remember if it was a 3-acre development in 2004, they didn't even have to get rezoning, did they? I mean, you could go ahead and build.
It might have been permissible. Now, 5 acres is permissible. You don't have to. Yeah.
No, I know, but that's
Yeah.
only in the last 8 years or so. In 2004, did we actually rezone that, or were they under the old 3-acre where you could just come in and build it?
No, you had to have 5. I built in 2000, 1999, 2000, and I had the 5, and I was unincorporated area of the county.
So we had changed to 5 by when?
I don't know, but I can tell you in 1999, 2000, it was still 5 acres, because that's why I ended up with 6.
If you remember, Steve, I can't remember if you were here or not when we did this, but we did this. Wayne Anthony was adamant about this, and Robert, you were here. We changed it because of infrastructure, because of septic tanks, and there was a variety of reasons. And so we were putting an influx of development in the area that just doesn't have the infrastructure. And it's not really, you know, we have all the building in the other areas up north and everything like that, and that's fine. That's part of a good plan. But there needs to be a nice rural community in our county as well. So we need to protect those assets. And so that's why it's important. And that's why people move out there and build nice houses and have a nice 5. I think 5 acres is too small. If you remember when we did this, we tried to do 10 acres, but I didn't have the support of the council. So
yeah. No, I was just going to add some.
Yeah.
I was going to add to what you said. Robert, do you remember the year?
March of 2007.
2006.
2006, and this was done in 2004.
Yeah.
And what you said is correct. It's a good argument for what we did. I think when I first presented this idea, and what I was concerned about was that we were allowing people to go out and just build 3-acre without getting any kind of rezoning. In other words, the council really wasn't making a decision. This area is going to be 3-acre. And you kind of saw that, you know, some people coming in and say, well, there's already a subdivision there, 3 acres, so I should get it too. Well, the fact is, you never did make a decision back then. Under the ordinance at the time, they could do 3 acres. And, you know, the point is here, if you think it ought to be 3 acres in that entire area, then you're going to decide that.
Yeah,
if you think it shouldn't be 3 acres, you're going to make that decision, but nobody's going to just go build 3 acres without going through this process and actually making a decision of what that whole area could be. Because what we had is people going out there building 3 acres and then kind of presenting us with a fait accompli. You know, hey, you know, my neighbor has it, he has it, why can't I get it? So that's kind of the history of that. And, you know, whatever you decide, it's important because it's probably going to determine not only this piece of property, but the property down the line next to it.
The idea of what happened in the past is when we were, if it was a 5-acre permissible building lot, then it would, if we were to give them 3 acres, it was typically because it was closer to a municipality line. If it was like Wentzville or something like that, where you would throw up a 3-acre subdivision to block the cities from coming into the rural area, and that's the strategy. But it's not putting 5-acre lots in a completely rural area. It's just, I mean, 3-acre lots in a completely rural area, because it's too rural, and it creates burdens for the people who live there. And plus, you know, how fair is it to these folks this guy who did these subdivisions, he did 2 or 3 of them, and they could have been different developers, I'm not sure who, but they bought the ground and they put 5-acre lots in, and I think they're probably close to being sold out. So all of a sudden they switch and they say, oh, by the way, now you can do 3 acres when these folks bought 5 acres and this developer did that. You know, so it's workable. They've been doing it, and so that's why, that's my position on this. Oh, yes, Joe.
You know, another thing, like in my district, 3-acre lots that are adjacent to the towns of St. Paul, Flint Hill, Josephville, those are perfectly acceptable because those communities allow 3-acre lots, and most of those developments there are in relatively flat farm fields, okay? Makes sense. The ground where these folks are at is hilly. There's already water detention issues, runoff issues, et cetera, and you don't have access to the roads quite as well as we do in District 1. So that being all said, I think that this part of the county is different and it requires a little bit more protection than other parts of the county where, like in my district, where we would allow 3-acre lots in, okay? So I don't support this either. I think 5-acre lots is appropriate for that area of the county. And I think you'll still see nice homes built down there, whether it's a 3-acre lot or a 5-acre lot.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one other issue, if I could have Mike come up. I thought one of the speakers made a good point about maintaining some of the forested land. And Mike, what is our requirements in terms of maintaining trees?
So the tree preservation ordinance requires 10% of the woodland area to be preserved or 25% of the lots. So it's a either or situation, but it's 25% is the standard, is the typical. However, that does not apply to ag district. Ag district is exempt from the tree preservation ordinance. Therefore, 5-acre development does not have tree preservation requirements.
So they could do 5 acres on this particular area, and they could wipe out all the trees and it doesn't matter at all.
Correct.
So whether it's 3 acres or 5 acres, the whole preservation part of it is not part of the plan.
Right.
We need to change it.
No, it is if it's 3.
If it's 3 acres.
But if it's 3, it is. If it's 5, it's not.
Correct.
Which is something you might want to look at down the road.
Yeah, we need to change that.
In the future.
Yeah, we can change that, but no one's going to buy 5 acres with trees off of it. I mean, the asset are all the trees, and so then if a developer went in there and took all the trees off of 5 acres, he'd be making a grave mistake. So that just doesn't happen.
It's usually a lot of trees to clear it for 5 acres too. So.
Yeah, they leave that up to the person that buys the lot. So, and so the last 3-acre subdivision, Mrs. Muller, you've been seeing all of her photos. I mean, it doesn't do her any good. I mean, it's washing her creek away. You've been seeing the bridge is getting washed away, and this is another issue that we're dealing with down there because of this 3-acre subdivision. So that doesn't do her any favors. She's agriculture, you know, so anyway. Thank you, Michael.
Mike, I'm sorry, when I was an alderman in St. Paul, we wrote a tree preservation ordinance that wouldn't have loopholes like the one we talked about. I'll get a copy of that and forward it to you to take a look at, and also the counselor's office. Okay.
It's question I have is with 3-acre or 5-acre, is there any requirements for detention, water detention?
No, for the 3-acre developments do not require detention. However, if somebody were to choose to put detention in, that detention basin has to be placed in common ground.
Yeah.
So that would be, they'd have to set aside ground as not part of the lot to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mike. Dale, could you come back up?
Well, I just kind of wanted to address a couple of the concerns that the board might have and some of the residents that have came and spoke this evening about this 3-acre lot development that we're proposing on 84 acres of property. Certainly, we want to protect our neighboring properties with increased water runoff. That's definitely that's at the forefront of our minds when we're doing development in St. Charles County and all over the area. As it's been said, 3-acre lot developments and 5-acre lot developments typically would not increase the water runoff to warrant detention. In this particular case, I know Mrs. Alice back there has spoken a few times and sent some letters in, and she's enduring some of these runoff factors from an existing 3-acre lot subdivision next door called Auburn Meadows. We have chosen to add a lake to our property. It was presented to planning and zoning. At that time, we did not talk about detention in that particular lake. Since this water runoff, increase of runoff is surfaced, we have added an outfall structure to our lake to control the actual storm runoff that's actually running towards Alice's property. So it would be providing a form of detention for the 20-some acres that's draining towards Alice. There's 25 acres of the 84 acres that drains in her direction. The remaining of the property either drains towards Auburn Meadows or it drains within inside our development, which is an existing water course that we're protecting. When it comes to trees, we're not doing ourselves any favors going in and clear cutting a piece of ground and then putting up lots for sale. That would be the opposite of what you would want to do, and you're doing land development for a single-family residential. The more trees we can preserve, the less trees we cut down for the infrastructure development, only helps not only the developer and the builder of the lots, but it helps the surrounding neighbors and the end user, which is the person buying the lots. As spoken earlier, we can't control what trees are cut down by the individual lot owners after they purchase their homes. Typically, a lot owner would not want to cut down any trees and only the minimal trees that they would need to put their home in, their driveways, any accessory buildings, and so forth. So our idea is to preserve this property with not only the trees, but we'd like to preserve the property and our neighboring properties by adding this detention basin to help protect water runoff on this development. So it's very important for us to do that. And I just wanted to explain to you that the two biggest problems that I'm hearing right now is trees and water runoff. And we're certainly intuitive of that, and we're looking into providing additional protection for the southern neighbor. And that's really what I wanted to speak about this evening. So if you've got any further questions, I'll answer them. If not, you can continue the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Bax.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on to Bill 4799.
Bill number 4799, requested by Michael Herbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance of the County of St. Charles, Missouri, approving a preliminary plat for the Hyman K Tract.
This is the same one, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments? Claire?
Let's do that all over again.
Yeah. No, we won't do that. Go ahead.
Bill number 4800, requested by Mike Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance affirming the Board of Zoning Adjustments decision on application ZAP 19-01.
Any questions or comments on this? Which one is this, Michael?
4800.
Okay.
I do have a question about this one, Mr. Councilman, Mr. Chairman, rather.
Yeah.
I guess there's a controversy that the property owner thinks that it's less than half the property's damaged, and the county thinks it's more than property, 50% of the property damage. Okay, I would just like to hear from that property owner at the next meeting if they're listening tonight, okay? And Mr., is that correct, am I correct in reading that? Is that correct interpretation?
What the hell is this anyway?
Do you think that's over like $50,000 worth of damage and they got a bid from a contractor for $30-some thousand?
That's correct. The damage assessment actually came up with it's 106% damaged.
Mm-hmm.
So it was over 100% damaged.
So what you're trying to do here, Mike, is you're going to try to condemn the property, or the county, or someone's condemning it and tearing it
I'm not
down
doing
versus the
anything.
property owner wants to rebuild it? Is that correct?
Because it's over 50% damage, he would need to elevate the home before he could do any repairs. And he's appealed that to BZA. What he's actually appealing, just so everyone's information, is this is an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Division Director's decision that the damage assessment was what we came up with, the staff came up with. So the BZA affirmed the decision, the director's decision, and so they've appealed that BZA affirmation to you.
Just-
Chairman, I've got a question.
Yeah, David.
Are they offering grants to elevate those structures that you're aware of? Is there money available?
Well, the county has applied for flood mitigation grants, but insurance is actually typically steps in and helps with elevation cost. If the person has the insurance, they can try to do that.
Yeah. Do we know how much he received from the insurance company for damage?
I think it's in here.
I can provide that information. So we asked for a copy, if he would be willing to provide us a copy of the insurance results. And they had a very detailed breakdown, and it was $91,000 is what they determined to the damage to the property as a whole. Now, of that $91,000, because they provided a very detailed breakdown, we're able to back out that portion of the damage that was to the outbuildings, and also back out like dewatering, drying cost, and demolition, which under our ordinance says we're not to count towards the cost of damage. So when you back all that out, the insurance company estimated that the home alone had $65,000 worth of damage. And so we're faced with, the county came up with $106,000 in damage. The insurance company came up with $65,000 in damage. The magic number here is $50,000 in damage because that's half of the estimated market value. The homeowner came up with $32,000 in damage, but from our review, that was incomplete. It didn't include things like the destroyed septic system, things like that.
Yeah. What's the square footage of the home?
Let's see, it's in the report, but it's about 1,400 square feet, if I remember right.
1,400 square feet, so they're saying the value is 120,000, or what are they saying?
No, it's $100,000 and I think $23.
123.
Yeah, $100,023.
Mr. Chairman.
But how can you build hold on, Steve, how can you build a 1,400 square foot? I'm just asking, I mean, a 1,400 square feet for $100,000, I mean, that's not possible.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Steve?
may I ask Robert a question?
Yes, sir.
The chairman is trying to ask how you could do something reasonable under this federal regulation, which is always an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
And problem is, most of the time you can't. There isn't a reasonable explanation about why it's there or what you have to do. But if we don't, this is part of the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program that we have to enforce. All right, the 50% rule. If it's more than 50% damage, we can't wink and a nod and turn our head and act like the facts are something else, because if we do that, what can happen to us as far as FEMA is concerned?
Well,
they reduce our numbers.
This ordinance is in place because this helps our residents and property owners be eligible for disaster assistance. So FEMA says that if you want to be eligible for disaster assistance to individuals and to governments, then you really need to adopt this ordinance that ensures that development occurs in a way that's going to avoid the water as much as possible.
And 30 years ago, FEMA came in and basically did an audit of all of our Board of Adjustment decisions. And the Board of Adjustment was granting variances like we're talking about here, and they threatened to go ahead and cancel the flood insurance program in the entire county. So that's why they need to play this straight and look at the facts as they are. Because if you start trying to bend the facts, because of some kind of perceived hardship or whatever, the federal government really doesn't care. They're going to just look and make sure you enforce the rules.
Mr. Cronin.
Go ahead.
Okay. When I was a much, much younger man, I lived on a house on a floodplain that was up on piers on the Mississippi River, and I've been through a few floods. And the unfortunate situation of this is bad enough when somebody gets flooded out of a house like that, but it's like kicking them when they're down when you tell them they can't rebuild, okay? And I understand your hands are tied with the FEMA regulations, and I think that's unfortunate, but it's reality. So to these people that are this applicant, I think they should come before the council. I think they need to contact their federal officials as well and tell them, you know, what this law is doing to them. It's going to put them out of their home, which I think is a pretty serious thing. So
I think, though, what Mr. Ullman's saying is they're just following the process. I mean, as long as we go through this process, yeah.
I get that.
And if they want to keep the house there, they can elevate it.
Yeah.
I mean, if they've got that much from their insurance, ought to be able to raise it. And from the pictures I've seen, there was over 3 foot of water inside the main floor of this house. It's only a 1-story house. So, I mean, you get 3 foot in the house, water, and sits there as long as it's sat with this flood, the duration, that house is total. I mean,
So if he can get it fixed for 30 grand, he ought to be able to possibly get it elevated for 30 grand too and still be okay.
yeah, and have some money left.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, Mike.
One more thing. The decision is based on the information that the director had at the time, that Robert had at the time. The applicant has, since that time, tried to provide additional information to substantiate his claims. That information we've tried to go through and identify to see if there's a different opinion that should be rendered. Nothing has changed the opinion to this point. So I just want to point out to you, the BZA affirmed the decision based on the information, not on any new information that the applicant may bring. It has no bearing on the decision here.
Should you or could you bring the new information so we can have it part of the record at the next meeting?
No.
Okay.
The BZA decision is based on the information at the
information
time, not new information.
But can we look at the new information or not? We're not supposed to, or what?
Well, I mean, we can, as they bring in new information, if it changes the estimate, if they provide an appraisal that shows the value is whatever, and that changes, then obviously we would go back and change our decision based on that. So that it would negate the whole process here. But to date, they have not done that.
I got you. Okay.
So,
But the insurance company has already said the damage is 91,000, right?
65.
65.
Well,
but
65 to the house, but 91 total.
Total, right.
So,
Over what the assessed value is.
right,
Yes.
so I'm just trying to figure out, did this guy file a claim with his insurance? Never mind. So we're done. All right, moving on. Sorry.
Okay, all right.
Solving a problem that's
Thank
not
you,
mine
guys.
to solve.
All right, thank you. Moving on to Bill 4800. Mike, you might as well stay here on this one.
4801.
Oh,
Yeah.
4801.
Let's not do that again.
Let's not do
4801. Claire?
Bill number 4801, requested by Joe Brazel, Joe Cronin, sponsored by Joe Brazel and Joe Cronin. An ordinance amending section 405.090.E.7 of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, the Unified Development Ordinance, to add an exception to design requirements for accessory non-residential buildings over 200 square feet in our 1A zoning district to allow the construction of metal pole barns over 200 square feet on lots greater than 3 acres.
Let me start with this, just so, we had Dave, you were on this ad hoc committee, we did address a bunch of these pole barns and everything where we allow people the freedom to build bigger barns and things like that. This one caught me by surprise. From what I understand is you're not allowed to have a pole barn on a 3-acre lot. I talked to Mike about it. I'm not sure I have a dog in this fight, but Mr. Cronin, they got more 3-acre lots up his way than mine. I'm not a fan of 3 acres anyway, so I'm not so sure. This gentleman called me, and I don't know why we're getting involved in architectural design. It should be up to the subdivision if they're gonna allow it or not. And that was kind of my position, is I give people the freedom to choose on that kind of zoning, but I don't know. Michael is here to explain how we got here, because it is kind of before it was considered, 3 acres were considered agriculture. And within that zoning, you can have a pole barn. But then when we changed the RRs, we did some of the stuff that we didn't change. And it's a flow through, I guess. But if you want to explain it, what we talked about?
So the section that we're talking about is 405.090, Section E. It deals with design requirements for accessory structures. There is a prohibition against metal structures for any accessory structures within an R district. So it's not lot size, it's zoning. So all R districts, accessory structures cannot be all metal under over 200 square foot in size. So you can get the 10 by 10s, those can be metal, that kind of thing. But larger accessory structures cannot be all metal. And that prohibition was put in place in 2005 as part of a larger ordinance full of all kinds of text amendments. It was sponsored by Mr. White at the time, and then it was amended in 2006 to incorporate the RR district because that was a new zoning category, which is 3 acre minimum. And what it actually did was it exempted RR district to allow pole barns and accessory structures within that district. So RR zoning, 3 acre lots, can have metal accessory structures. That is per the ordinance. What can't be, in this case, there's an example here, there was a subdivision of 3 acre lots that was zoned R1A. R1.
How was it zone R1?
I don't know. I don't know. That predates a lot of people. So I don't know what happened there as to why it was developed as 3 acre lots within an R1A category, which they could have gone smaller, obviously. So they didn't. So it's a 3 acre lot within an R1A, and therefore they are not exempt from the metal prohibition.
So if it's an RR 3 acre, in today's world, that would be permissible.
Right.
Okay, so, and then I asked you the question, what this gentleman was told he could, I said, why don't you just go to the Board of Adjustment? So what did you find out? Can he just go to try to get a variance on this, whether in changing this?
So that would be considered a use variance, and therefore it is not allowed to go to the BZA. BZA does not hear the use variances. They would have to, their only reprieve would be to file the circuit court.
This is really just a cleanup ordinance, because the way the ordinance is right now, if you're zone R, if you have 3 acre lots on RR, you can build a pole barn, but if you have 3 acres lots on R1A, you cannot. So this just basically levels the playing field and makes it a condition to have a metal pole barn, a 3 acre lot. In my district, I have one, probably everybody in St. Paul, Josephville, and Flint Hills got one, okay? I mean, it's just common. Now, some people do make them match their house, but a lot of people do not. They put them to the back of the lot, and nobody even knows they're there. So, I mean, I think this just cleans things up and makes it uniform. It's kind of hard to tell a resident that, you know what, if you got R1A zoning, you can't do it, but if you got RR zoning, you can, even though you got 3 acre lots in both. So I'm supportive of this. I think it helps this gentleman in my district, and I think it's also the fair way to do things. So,
any other questions or comments? Thanks.
I have a question. Are the pole barns, is there a setback?
Yes, the accessory structures have a minimum front yard setback of 50 feet and a side yard of 7 feet. So that is something to consider or think about.
You could put one of these 7 feet from somebody else's house.
In a 3 acre subdivision, that could be impactful to a neighbor. I'm not sure exactly why the policy was put in place back in '05, what the metal prohibition was. I'm guessing that there was probably concerns voiced by residents that it detracted from their value and the quality of their what they felt was their subdivision, the built environment. So the fact is that is something to consider as you change the policy here. Is that going to impact the people that potentially had the issue to begin with?
Well, I agree with Mr. Cronin, but when he said they put it back on the back of their lot, it occurred to me, so they could put it on the back of their lot within 7 feet of somebody else's home.
I'm not aware of the 9 years that I've been on the council of any complaints in my district about a pole barn. Okay. In fact, we had one instance with a farmer off of Highway Y where his pole barn was going to be closer to his neighbor's property, and his neighbor came and testified in support of the guy's pole barn.
I just remember how concerned everybody was about a winery within so many feet of their property.
That's District 2.
Pole barn's different. I'd rather have a winery than a pole barn.
We're all good neighbors in District 1. I got a bunch of winos down there in District 2. But anyway, with a 75-foot setback is what it is, you've got plenty of room to put a row of white pines or something like that if the person's concerned about the looks of it.
Yeah.
Did you say 75 or 7?
It's 7.
7 foot.
7 foot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
That's a big
remember this when this
You-
ordinance
you
went
might be able
into
to
effect,
provide
and
some
you're
insight.
exactly right. There was a lot of people complaining in subdivisions where they had 1 and 2 acre lots, some of them smaller than that they were putting in large metal pole barns. And that's why the ordinance was changed back then.
Mike, could you highlight how this fits then with the change that was made a year ago, 2 years ago, to allow for accessory but not accessory structures as well? How will that overlay?
Oh, yeah, the ordinance that was changed to allow accessory structures to be placed on a lot before a primary structure, so that somebody in a 3-acre subdivision that hadn't built their house yet, if this change were to happen, not only could they put an accessory structure in before without a house, it could be a metal accessory
I think
structure
that
all by
you-
itself.
That's exactly what I did when I built my home. That's a very common practice in my district. You put your pole barn up first, you put all your woodworking tools, you put all your supplies in there, then you build your home. But you also present a site plan with that when you do it. I think modifying the setback requirements might be something we want to look at, though. Maybe we need to be, I thought it was wider than 70 feet. Maybe it's something we need to look at a little bit.
Mike, the 3-acre subdivision versus agriculture and 5 acres is different in my view
Right,
too. So
right.
we can talk about it
And that's the thing, this is agricultural subdivision, or development, or a house on an agricultural land, they can build a metal.
5
metal
acres,
building.
yeah, but 3 acres is a subdivision. And most of them have the HOAs anyway, they don't let you do it anyway. So it's really kind of a,
Well, what I'm saying is, even a 1-acre lot in an agricultural zoning district could do a metal building.
All right.
Right now, because it's ag, not the lot size.
Right.
It's the zoning. So,
thank you, sir.
sure.
All right, moving on to 4802.
Bill number 4802, requested by Craig Tykowski, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute the cost share agreement for project number J6S3507 for Route I-64 Outer Road from Prospect Road to Quail Ridge Park with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for reimbursement of 50% of total project costs up to and not to exceed the maximum amount of $1,539,500.
Any questions or concerns?
Do you want to ask Mike to come back up again?
No.
Just kidding.
All right, moving on to 4803.
Bill number 4803, requested by Amanda Brower, sponsored by council as a whole. An ordinance approving a First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the City of St. Peters for reconstruction and improvement of Spencer Road.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on to 4804.
Bill number 4804, requested by Amanda Brower, sponsored by council as a whole. An ordinance approving a First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Lake St. Louis for reconstruction of Lake St. Louis Boulevard Phase 3.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on to 4805.
Bill number 4805, requested by Bob Schnur, requested by John White, sponsored by John White. An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute a contract for services, contract number ER 130200090, for Victims of Crime Act with the Missouri Department of Social Services Family Support Division.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on to 4806.
Bill number 4806, requested by Bob Schnur, sponsored by John White. An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute a contract for services, contract number ER 130200091, for Victims of Crime Act with the Missouri Department of Social Services Family Support Division and St. Charles County Prosecutor's Office.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on, 4808.
Bill number 4807,
I'm sorry,
requested by
4807. Yeah.
Scott Shipman, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the City of O'Fallon, the City of St. Charles, the City of St. Peters, the City of Wentzville, the City of Lake St. Louis, the City of Garden Prairie, the City of Weldon Spring, and the City of Cottleville, Missouri, to share costs for high-resolution, geo-referenced aerial imagery from pictometry.
Any questions or comments on 4807?
I love this, and I'm glad we're doing it.
This was joint, this took a lot of time. You guys did a lot of work on it. Thank you
Yeah,
for,
thank you
for
very
doing
much.
this. Yeah.
It was Scott Shipman who really brought this to us, and I know Matthew and Jennifer have worked on it really hard, so.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, 4808.
Bill number 4808, requested by Steve Elman, sponsored by council as a whole. An ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute agreements for advocacy and lobbying services.
Any questions or comments on 4808?
I do, okay. You don't have to go very far to see the work of our road advocate in this county. Gary Elmstead has been instrumental in a lot of projects in this county, and having worked with him, I know that he busts his tail to try to get those things going. Although I do have questions about the lobbyists, and I would request from the administration a list of the things that they've done for us in the last few years, because this comes up every year. Also, I'd like to point out that there's not a copy of the contract with those lobbyists that we're asked to be approved for the executive to sign. So that being said, I would request for next meeting that we get a little more information on this. I'd like to see the contract. I'd like to also know what benefits we've gotten in the past from those lobbyists. Okay.
Mr. Hammond?
Yeah. And is it correct that Mr. Elmstead is no longer with us on that group?
No, he is until the end of the year, and then we'll have to see if he'll sign another contract after this.
Oh.
He was not very happy when I explained to him that since we're not giving the employees a raise, we can't give our lobbyists a raise. And it's been several years since he had one. Actually, our other lobbyists, came and asked for a raise too, and I told him, hey, we just can't do it now, and he understood. And that's Mike Gibbons, our lobbyist in Jefferson City. I will give you a list. Most of the things that he has done for us is to kill bills that would have hurt us. So you're going to get a list of bills that didn't pass because he worked to keep them from passing. I would say, what do you think? 80% of our efforts, 80% of our efforts in Jeff City are defensive to keep bad bills. I mean, I can give you a list of bad bills that didn't pass because we worked hard to make sure they didn't.
That's really unfortunate, because what they need to be doing is stuff like putting a fuel tax before the voters. It's clean, and like passing an internet sales tax. And instead, we got to spend money to keep them from screwing things up for St. Charles County. That's pretty unfortunate. But I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get you a list of. But again, it'll be a list of bills that 80% of it will be bills that didn't pass.
Thank you, Steve. Any other quick comments on 4808? All right, that concludes bills for introduction. Moving on to table bills. Are there any table bills to be removed?
Make a motion that we remove bills number 4790 and 4791. We had tabled them before because we didn't have the time in between the two meetings to pass them. So we've hit that time frame now, and I would ask that both these bills be put back on the.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bill 4790 and 4791 has been on the table. Mike, 4790. Any comments or
Bill
questions?
number
Oh,
4790.
I'm sorry.
An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute a program services contract with the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services for violent death and overdose death surveillance reimbursement.
Any questions or comments on 4790? Seeing none?
Bill number 4790, an ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute a program services contract with the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services for violent death and overdose death surveillance reimbursement. Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Brazel.
Yes. Bill 4790 is passed. Moving on to Bill 4791.
Bill number 4791, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute a professional service agreement between St. Charles County, Missouri, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri, in conjunction with the Missouri Highway Patrol as fiscal agent and Nauman Wadalawala as an independent contractor.
Any questions or comments on 4791? Seeing none?
Bill number 4791, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute a professional service agreement between St. Charles County, Missouri, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri in conjunction with the Missouri Highway Patrol as fiscal agent and Nauman Wadalawala as an independent contractor. Councilman White.
Yes.
Councilman Hammond.
Yes.
Councilman Hollander. Councilwoman Schneider.
Yes.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Brazel.
Yes.
Councilman Elam.
Yes.
Bill 4791 is passed. That concludes our meeting. Are there any announcements and miscellaneous? Yes, Mr. Cronin.
I don't certain if it was St. Nick or Santa Claus, but they dropped off a present at my house for our county government. I left it on Mr. Ellman's desk. I would ask him to open it, please.
I mean, open it now.
Okay?
Is it,
I think it might have been
is it more money for next year's budget?
Well, being that next year's budget's is stretched, I didn't think the county could afford this, so I asked Nick and Santa Claus to bring it to you.
Did you wrap it yourself?
Yes. No. I'm sorry. Saint Nick probably wrapped it.
There you go. It's one of the elves. I like that Mr. Watson keeps moving further away.
Extra batteries are included.
What is it?
Some metal detector?
Is that what it is?
It is.
There's
Give it to the
extra
devil.
Am I
batteries.
supposed to detect the people over here at this table? And
Yes,
get one
there's
for-
extra batteries included.
Is that for our security, our needed security?
Yes. That's
Mr.
something I've
Conan,
been-
that is a very very nice
Something I've
gift.
been preaching about for 8 or 9
Does
years.
Steve have to stand at the front door and check everybody, or can he delegate
Well, I bet that man back there knows how to do that.
I'll give it to him.
That's a great gift.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
very much.
Could I make a quick
Yes,
comment?
Nancy.
Okay, I don't know if any of you have heard, but this has been on Facebook for a while. It's come to the attention that Lindenwood is going to be attempting to tear down the brick water tower that's up there. I don't know if anybody's heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I actually did talk to the mayor about it, and he had just had a meeting that morning with the new president of Lindenwood, who I have not met. And apparently, they're claiming that the structure is unsound, and they want to tear it down. I think the city sold that to Lindenwood a number of years ago for $1. And apparently, the last time it was worked on, it was about $60,000, and now Lindenwood is too poor to do it, and they want to tear it down. And I think that would be a shame. It's a beautiful structure. I lived across the street from it for 38 years, and I've grown rather fond of it. And it's my understanding that what they're would have to do, and I guess what they're intending to do, is file for a demolition permit with the city government. And so if anybody has an interest in that, I'd urge you to follow it, or perhaps to contact your city councilman and give your opinion about whether or not you think that's a good thing. We've just lost so many beautiful historic buildings, homes, whatever, in St. Charles over the last, 25 years. And I personally would hate to see that one turned into a pile of rubble. So that's my comment.
Any other
Mr. Chairman?
announcements? Yes, Steve.
To inquire of Councilman Schneider.
Excuse me?
Yeah, you don't have a problem if they tear down the white metal ones?
No, I wish they would. Then we
I do
could see
too.
the other one a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there used to be a sign on the top of it.
I remember
Did it
that.
say Lindenwood or St. Charles? I forget.
That was St. Charles.
It said St. Charles.
Yeah.
And that was the main tower, well, those 3 towers before they built the really big one down the street.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can tear down those.
That old
ones.
one, I mean, goes back to, I think, 1911 or something
Yeah,
like that.
I heard it was over 100 years old.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't understand why the alumni or somebody couldn't start some sort of a drive if Lindenwood just can't afford to pay for that. Maybe there could be some sort of a, a fund drive or something.
Well, I think
so.
the new president.
brick on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, John, you want to tell them about what happened the other day?
Let's see, I'm trying to get, yeah, on Friday, we did execute all the closing documents on both the Missouri Bluffs, the roads, as well as the acquisition of the purchase land agreement with the university. And I will say we got our first payment from the lease and the settlement offset of $4,000.
Oh, boy.
So we're on our way. Beginning next year, it's a quarterly payment of $25,000. So we'll be receiving $100,000 a year from that lease agreement. And by and large, all of the negotiations to the end went pretty much as planned, and the closing went fine.
Great.
Great.
One other, and the university did provide a check for $500,000 of escrow. And again, just to remind everybody, what we will do is We provided them all of the upgrades that would need to be done before we accept those roads. They signed off on all of those upgrades, and then that was their last opportunity to weigh in on that. So it'll go out to bid when Craig, probably, I'm assuming in March or something, and go out to bid. Whatever that bid comes in, whenever the work is done and the final bill is submitted, we will true that up with the university as it relates to the 500,000 escrow. So if it's more, the lowest the difference. If it's less, we'll reimburse them. But that's where that is.
Finally, it's now time to actually thank Scott. Would you come up, please?
He's thinking no.
Everybody's been a little bit premature. So
Permission to approach the bench?
permission granted.
For the last time. Well,
For
at
the
least
last
as a
time
county
as
employee, right?
Well, there we go.
Okay, well, I'm gonna treat you first as an employee and say thank you very much for the great service that you provided us and the leadership that you've not only provided for your people out there, but really in the entire state. I mean, you've been a real leader in the state in what you do, and thank you for that. But the next thing, I want you to give us your predictions on where we're going from here, because you're moving to a job that I think is even more important. And you might want to just make sure they all understand the great news we got this week out at General Motors, and maybe just a word about where you think the county's going from here at the EDC, and
Sure.
and again how we're going to maybe work with some of these folks on the other side of the river on economic development.
Well, then let me first respond as a county employee and say thank you very much for having me come aboard of your team the last 4.5 years, and it's been an honor, been the pinnacle of my career at this point to work for you and your executive team here, so I do appreciate that. And so that did give us opportunities to help let the county lead in this area that maybe we had not done before, so that was a great opportunity. Thank you for that. So I'll be forever grateful. Then as I look ahead and put on the EDC hat, basically I predict that we're going to be headed into a recession in the next 12 to 18 months. So we're going to have a little bit of some headwinds. It's not going to be like it was before, but we've got some things that are going to be coming this way. We've got to be very strategic about the land that's left in our county. And so Mike and I have been working very closely with others to identify those mega sites that fit into our future land use plans. And then it's going to take working with the city administrators and the mayors and other elected officials to make sure we don't turn all that into retail or warehouse space or storage lockers, because that's strategic ground that we still have. So we've got to utilize it to the best of our ability. I've noticed that every 20 years we have a redevelopment, a new big thing that happens. Started with GM back in 1980. And that coming out this way, that sort of began the big growth that we've incurred over the last 40 years. And then 20 years later, with the MasterCards and the Citigroups of the world coming in, we're now at that 20-year mark again. It seemed to be Amazon, but GM came and trumped them again with the $1.5 billion reinvestment in the facility and their commitment to retain approximately 4,000 of those jobs over the next 5-10 years, as well as the fact we'll soon be looking at a new product, a new mid-size, next-generation product that they'll be bringing to market. So those are good things. So it's up to us. We've got new leadership at the Alliance. We've got new leadership at the St. Louis Economic Partnership. It's up to all of us to work together to try to have a cohesive strategy. Folks aren't just moving to O'Fallon or Wentzville. Big companies are looking, what's the Metropolitan MSA doing? That encourages the things that you guys are doing over at the East-West Gateway area. So it's important that we have a strategic plan, we go after our sectors, and we don't just move pieces around on the board, as somebody is prone to say. That's an important thing. The other part is, I've been pointing out, and Mike brought this to my attention, thank you for this, Mike, 62% of our residents leave the county on a daily basis to go to better paying jobs somewhere else in the community. I thought the goal was to not let this become a bedroom community, so I want to work together to try to change some of that, because it's all coming down to workforce. Everybody's building roads, everybody's got nice planning and zoning, everybody's got some tax policy that's out there, but now we've got to show them that we've got the workforce, and we want to bring some of those people back home
to back office operations, to IT, to financial services, to healthcare. And I really think that public administration is a sector we haven't really focused on. We need more teachers. We need more folks rising up that are going to be the next mayors, the next city administrators, and a lot of young people aren't thinking about public administration. I know I hadn't when I started my career, but it's been nothing but a blessing and a great opportunity to serve a lot of people. And so with that said, I want to thank you and wish the entire group here and there, everybody, just a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Let us know what we can do to help you.
I'll be back.
Good luck. And Merry Christmas.
Well, is there any other comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.